Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're going to be talking about the movie Arrival. So it came out a couple of years ago, and we're going to be going into spoiler territory for the movie. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out, watch it, and then come back and see what we have to say about it, because that's a movie you want to make sure you don't know anything about going into. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into this. So the whole reason that we're doing Arrival, like you might ask yourself, why are they doing this movie that took place like what, like did it come out in 2016? I don't remember, 2017. But point
2017.
is, that movie is very old. Well, very old, like 5 years. But the point is, why are we doing it right now? Well, it's because, as we said on our Twitch channel, which, by the way, if you want to see us over there, twitch.tv/C3 Films, we talk about this and more than what you just see on our YouTube recordings. But when we were talking on our Twitch channel, we found out that Cheryl did not like Arrival, and our chat was very, very concerned
Outraged.
by by that assessment for that movie. So we all were challenged and said we would watch the movie once more with an attempt to see if Cheryl's feelings towards the film were altered by any kind of way. And now, so here we are, the moment of truth. Cheryl, what did you think of Arrival?
No, you go first.
Everybody already knows I love Arrival. Rabble, rabble, rabble. And everyone knows I love Arrival. Arrival is like one of my favorite movies of all time. It's probably not in my top 10, but it's definitely in like my top 20. It's a very solid movie for me. And in a moment, I'm gonna go, and Cheryl can go first. Ladies first.
Strong female leads.
You know what? Exactly. So I will tell you guys why I enjoyed the movie later after we hear from our strong C3 Films' own strong female lead, Cheryl. So after you.
Alright, so I can see why everybody liked the movie. And I can also say that I thought it was better the second time watching it than the first time. So, I guess to explain, I think, if you've been watching our show long enough, everybody knows that I do not usually like movies that are messing around with time and not told in chronological order. And the reason why is because I feel like it's not usually done well. And there are rare occasions where it's done simply enough or well, like very well, that makes me like it. So the reason why I can say I didn't like it the first time is because I got bored. So I didn't actually watch the whole movie the first time. But then I heard it was good, so I watched it again, like the whole movie. And I just didn't think it was that good. And like, I don't think it's a bad movie. So I'm not gonna say that I don't think it wasn't that good. I just think it wasn't for me. Like, I am not the target audience. Does that explain it? But I'm open to hearing about like why you like it so much. Maybe you could sway my mind
I
about
like how
it.
you're like really doing your best job to not step on all these landmines around you. That was like the most safe way of trying to tell the audience that you did not like the movie. That would have not result in you like getting blown up.
But I didn't dislike it either. Like, especially watching it the second time, I feel like I appreciated it more watching the second time than the first time I watched it. And there's nothing inherently bad about it that I like watched and didn't like. Like, none of my notes are bad. Like, there was this one.
go Go on.
Sorry, just laughing because of what Flayman just said. But there's nothing about like the movie that I didn't like. I just don't think that this genre of film is for me. That's all. Like I just don't enjoy these kinds of movies. And I'm gonna hurt everyone's feelings again right now. And God, don't make me watch the movie. I did not get through Memento.
Oh.
And this is the same thing. Like, I think the thing about these kinds of movies is, like, there's a big question, right? And the big question for this movie, and the same thing as Memento, is what's going on. That's the question that is driving everybody to keep watching, right? I hate that question. Right. That's the kind of question that I don't enjoy being asked in a movie.
Wait, the question of what's going on?
Yeah, what's going on, right?
I mean, that's like the entirety behind the Matrix.
Yeah, but then there's other aspects of that movie that make it interesting, right? Like you can watch that whole movie without knowing what's going on or what the story's about, but still enjoy it because it looks good and it's kind of like it's cool and stuff.
Right, but it sounds like there's something more than just what's going on, because I actually would argue that most movies are built upon that premise of what's going on.
Right, but
because there's always this inherent mystery in just like the story for you to figure out.
Yeah, but
over time.
But the way that this movie is, and also Memento is, it's not a specific question. It's literally like, what is going on? What is happening? Like, what am I seeing? What is being shown to me? I don't know what this is. We're seeing like visions of like this girl and everything, but I have no clue what it is yet. I have to keep watching to figure it out. You have to keep.
That's not necessarily true on the first viewing of this movie, because like the movie. So we're gonna go a little bit into why I like the movie, but because the movie is playing with your expectation for what a movie is. Because like when we watch movies and we see like these little cutaways to a different time, normally we associate that with being flashbacks. And that's intentional. That's why with the start of the movie, we see her with her daughter and go up until the point where her daughter dies. Because at that point, we're supposed to think that everything that happens now is after her daughter died. And so when you see those flashbacks, they're not really so much a question. They're more like she's remembering her daughter's life. When you're watching a movie on the first watch through, up until you get closer to the end, they just play like, from a new audience perspective, it just plays like any other movie where you just see someone remembering someone that's gone, like having a flashback scene in the middle of a scene and then jumping back. So that isn't as much a question of what you're looking at, I would say, because it's meant to be played as just you thinking that she's remembering her daughter's life, and that because her daughter died before she is now at this point.
Yeah, but
on the first watch through.
Yeah, see, my issue with that is like I don't know why I'm being shown that, because it's not correlated to the present time. There's no connection to it, so I'm just seeing two different things and I don't know why. So then my question becomes, what is this? what is going on? What am I watching? I don't know yet. I need more clues, and I need to interpret those clues. And that is not for me. So I understand what you're saying, that like every movie is that question, right? Like what am I watching? What am I seeing? But you have different questions, more targeted questions for like for example, Knives Out, right? And we had watched Knives Out before, and discussed it on the show. So if you want to check that out, it's on our YouTube. But the question for Knives Out is, who done it?
Right. So, simple question.
Yeah, it's a simple question. It's a targeted question, and it's a more simplified, guided question. Whereas a movie like this is so open-ended that it could be anything, and I think that's too much for me. Like, I don't want to think that much when I'm watching a movie, and that's okay. Like, it makes me feel kind of like unintelligent sometimes, but like it's just not what I want to do when I'm watching a movie, is like think that hard. Perhaps
Hmm.
if like I was in the mood to like really solve a puzzle visually, and um I heard that like I know Memento is like that, and I hadn't watched the whole thing through.
Hmm.
So if I really wanted to like be visually challenged and solve a mystery where I have to like really interpret the clues, I'm gonna go watch Memento. But I haven't done that yet because I don't want to do that. So
Right. So I will say, like, for me, I didn't feel so much like I was trying to solve a mystery. It kind of, to me, it actually kind of played a similar type of feeling that I would have if I was watching something like Knives Out, where everything that I'm seeing, I don't know how, like, let's just say, like you were saying, you don't know where all the puzzles fit together, and you don't really see the full image until the end. And then that makes it can recontextualize everything. So then now you're like, oh, wait a second. So, like, when I was watching on my first watch, and this is like my second or third time watching the film. But on my first watch when I saw it in theaters, the thoughts that I had was like, okay, shots of her daughter, and then I immediately stopped thinking about it, just thinking to myself, it'll make sense why they're showing me these shots of her daughter later, and like how that past correlates with this present. And then the reason that I like movies like The Matrix and also like Arrival is because, and even movies like Knives Out, is because when you watch it on a second viewing, it feels like you're watching a different movie because you have a different understanding. So like in this first initial viewing where I'm going through the what I think is a linear timeline and I see these moments where she's flashing back to her daughter and whatnot, and then you get to that moment when she asks, "Who is this girl you're showing me?" In that moment, I love the feeling that you get of, or like the feeling that I got of, oh snap, she's not seeing the past, she's seeing the future, and then they tell you they come out and just say that's what happens, but it trusts that the audience is going to figure that out in that moment, and that's what I like that feeling that you get because it immediately makes you want to go back and look at all those scenes again, and when you go back and watch it for another viewing, which in this case this was another viewing for me, when it's done very well because you see that opening scene where they show like the daughter's life to death, and even with the dialogue that starts it with saying, "I thought this was the beginning of your story," it's meant to parallel. You think that this is the beginning of the film story, and then when you get in there, you actually don't see any flashbacks at all until she meets with the aliens the first time. After the first meeting with the aliens, that is the first time you see the flashback when she is in the bunker that night. And so now, stylistically, this serves two purposes. One is meant to serve a kind of story contextual purpose, just so that you see like the scenes of her daughter or whatever. But two, it's actually visually showing you a change in the character because that's the moment that she started changing. So this it's almost like diegetic versus non-diegetic sound. This is like a diegetic flashback where she is actively seeing the flashback that we are seeing, but it's representing the change in her. And it's not just like we're seeing it; she's seeing it almost like the same way that we're seeing it, except she's kind of like living it, and that's why she's confused. And there's this moment when the guy Ian tries to ask her, "Hey, like, are you okay?" After she has one of her like flashbacks, and she's about to start trying to explain it, but then she gets cut off before, and so you're like, okay, but you're just thinking she's just having a dream about like the fact that her daughter died, but you realize on a second viewing that she's starting to see a future that she doesn't understand and she's just very confused about it, and that's what I really enjoyed about it because it's two different feelings. The first feeling is this feeling of aha, oh my gosh, this all makes sense, but then on the second viewing it's this feeling of, oh, I can see how they put it together. But when you get to that reveal moment, you can't replicate that first feeling you got on an initial viewing, so your enjoyment of the movie now becomes less about the surprise and more about just the technique of telling the story.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I can see like how it would do that for some people because like that's how I felt when I watched Knives Out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it just when I finished the movie the first time, I was like, oh, okay,
Hmm.
Like there was nothing about it that made me go, "Oh, I want to watch this again." I think that maybe the difference is the journey where I think it just wasn't interesting enough or like fast paced enough for me to like enjoy the journey
Hmm.
to get to
It's
the end.
Yeah, and that's something that can vary from person to person. Like, it's a different type of alien movie, and most people when they see alien movies, it is more fast paced. It is like death and destruction, and that's another reason why I also like this movie is because it's a different take on an alien invasion, right? Like normally aliens are bad and evil whenever we they come to Earth, but this is an example of aliens actually coming to help us. So one, it's kind of like a positive message in that way, but two, it is showing how communication is like a different way of like engaging with aliens, like when normally it's like a whole fighting type thing, but this puts communication and language at the forefront, which is something I hadn't seen before, and it shows you how a language expert would go about communicating with a group of peoples or a group of sentient beings that you've never interacted with before. How does that work? How do you learn different mannerisms? And then like, so I get really interested in like kind of almost the science behind language, where you hear her talking and saying, well, this question, what is your purpose? Well, in order to understand this question, you need to understand what your is, not you as an individual, but your as a collective, and then this and that and the other. And I was like, there's so many language things that we take for granted that I never even thought about until I saw this movie, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. So that's another reason that I get pulled in. But I can absolutely say that yes, it is a very kind of slow and methodically paced movie. So, and if you really think about it, the biggest action set piece moment is when those soldiers try to blow up the aliens from the inside. But outside of that, it's not really any other quote unquote like standard action happens. I think the biggest action like moment outside of that would be the realization that she is learning what she needs to say to the general at the same time that the general is telling her what to say to him in the future, and she's getting that information in the past, because that's the movie kind of paying off what it's tried to build up until that point of like this living in all these moments at once, and now it's the payoff of we're using that almost kind of like superpower to to solve the problem of the movie, to stop this general from attacking an alien race.
Yeah, and like everything you just said about like the language and everything, the communication, miscommunication stuff, I actually really liked that stuff. I thought
Mm-hmm.
it was really interesting the way she like broke down the strategy for like the reason behind why we have to start with like basic vocabulary to be able to get to the point of being able to really communicate with these aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And so like to me that was like the most interesting part, and then she kept having these flashes and I just didn't understand why, like they just didn't correlate for me, and I don't understand. Like
Mm-hmm.
here we're having this alien interaction and the language stuff is interesting, and then now we have to see this weird stuff about like flashes of her life, and there's a lot of like long lingering shots, and there's this shot of like the girl in like tall grass and stuff, and it reminded me of Gladiator and stuff
Oh
like that.
gosh.
And I was like, why do we need this grass stuff? But um, like it's just kind of stuff like that, and that's a personal thing. Like that's a me thing. Like the pacing for that is so slow that I feel like I can I can't like look away, because if I look away, I'll miss something, and then like something important, because there is a lot of visual storytelling in this
Yeah,
movie,
there is a lot of detail.
but the amount of actual things happening, it's like I just felt like if I look away, I'm gonna miss something. But then I keep
Mm-hmm.
I keep watching it, and I'm like, I don't need to see this.
Wow. Yeah, it's
Like
it's interesting.
not that I don't need to see this, but I don't need to see like the ceiling pan down to the window to the silhouette of her drinking coffee, and that's 10
Mhm.
seconds of my life.
Oh gosh. But yeah, it's interesting because like those flashback moments, like they're also intentional for establishing because it's trying to hint, right? Like that's what these like all these great movies do, is that they try to set up hints for you to recognize what's happening, so that when you do watch it a second time, you get it. So like these moments where you see her like kind of staring and she sees the flashback and she's staring again, you're just thinking that she's thinking about it, but then it escalates even in just a subtle moment that, yeah, you do blink and you can kind of miss it when she gets asked in the quote unquote flashback, which is actually a flash forward, by her daughter, what is it when two people have a win win situation, but it's more sciencey term. And she doesn't get the answer right away. But then in the past, which is our present at the time that we're watching the movie, the guy says, Ian says, it's a zero sum game. And she hears that. And then the immediate next cut is that future shot where she answers her daughter and says, zero sum game. And so right then and there, like when you watch it initially, you're thinking, oh, that's just like a cool editing thing. That's just showing that she like remembered it. Um, but then at the same time, but you're like, wait a second, that was a flashback. If that was a flashback, she's remembering it then, but she's not remembering it at the point that we're seeing in the story right now that we understand to be the present. Then that's supposed to get you to start asking questions of, wait, what? That's a little weird, but story wise, that's to show you exactly what's happening, of how the things that are happening in this past are affecting this other moment that you think is the past, but is actually the present. Like that's the movie giving you the answer without explicitly telling you that's the answer. So yeah, there's a lot of like things like that that, yeah, you can absolutely miss, but at the same time you're right that these moments are very, like they're very stretched, but once again, yeah, it is intentional because they're trying to kind of build something slowly and methodically that you can like interact with and like kind of like feel, and have it feel good by the time you get to the end. But yes, it is something that can be considered slow.
Yeah, and again, like I mentioned, I definitely appreciated it more the second time that I watched it because I knew what I was watching, and
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it's like watching a different movie because you understand. Like now that you know the ending, you understand what we're actually seeing. And
Mm-hmm.
so things just start to make sense why we were seeing that kind of stuff. The thing for me is just it, like we didn't even really need the whole thing with the aliens because it's like kind of two very different stories. Like you kind of could have just put that alongside anything kind of sci-fi. Like I can't. I mean, it's hard to say actually,
Yeah, because
but
the
they
whole point
just
is that
feel so different. You know, um, like her, like the story of her having a daughter who dies is a very different story from um, I'm a like a language person and I have to figure out how to communicate with these aliens.
I think they're really tied together because the language, like I said, there's a couple of little things that they bring up. Like Ian brings up this whole thing about how if you learn a language, it can reprogram your brain. And so she's learning the alien's language, which allows her brain to be reprogrammed, which is why she can like see through time, or she's basically living all these moments in time at once. And that ties to the daughter because, once again, this isn't something that is explicitly said, but the question becomes, when you know that your daughter's future is, you see it differently when it's in the past and you just think, okay, blah blah blah, she had a daughter, she lived and she died. But when you know that that's actually the future, that becomes the question of, if you know that your daughter is going to like have this rare disease and die, why would you still have a kid? And that's why you have these other moments of like she says, I just realized why my husband left me, because she told him that where our daughter is going to die and this is how. And she says that the husband Ian says, you made the wrong choice. And then she even asked him, hey, if you knew what your entire life was going to be like, what would you do? and that's her trying to like get a feel for it. So, and essentially, I think he gives an answer that says he would say what he feels more. But the whole idea in that moment is to say, hey, look, you now have the ability to see the future of this little girl. You can now make a choice where you can choose not to have that girl ever live, and she'll never suffer and die. But now that you have this ability that you only have because of the fact that you are a language expert, what are you going to do? And she chose, and that's the other message behind the movie. She thinks that it is still important enough to have the chance at life, even knowing that it's going to end in tragedy. She's still going to make that choice anyway because she wants her daughter to at least have that chance. And I think that that is like a very powerful decision to know that if someone is going to like be miserable, but you're still going to like you give them at least some type of life as opposed to denying them life altogether.
Yeah, and I really liked that like outlook, the thought behind that about, like, if you know the future, like, would you do something different?
Mm-hmm.
And I like that idea. I like that storyline of
Mm-hmm.
the fact that she can see the future. Um, I just think that that's something that I would enjoy watching on its own
In a different movie.
in a different movie. But then at the same time, I would also very much enjoy watching the other movie, which is all these people trying to figure out how to communicate with this alien, and like seeing the symbols and figuring out the symbols, the mythology behind, or the methodology behind it, in the sense of like the breaking down of a sentence and why you need to know all these different words,
Mm.
basic vocabulary. Like, all of it was interesting, but the
Yeah.
two of them next to each other in the same movie and like being intertwined with each other is the part that didn't work for me. So like, and that's like the weird thing. That's why I'm not saying I didn't like the movie. It's just not for me. Um, but I can see why everyone else likes it. And I can appreciate the way that the movie was made, because, like, I mean, it looks good. It was done very well. It's just that
Yeah.
style of movie is not for me. But like, the story is very interesting. Like, the whole idea of it is very interesting. The whole thing with the aliens is interesting. The whole thing with the future, her knowing the future, is very interesting. But all of it wrapped up together into this one movie called Arrival is not for me.
Well, is there anything else that you kind of wanted to say that you haven't gotten to bring up yet about the movie? Like, if there's any kind of scenes or like any other type of thoughts about characters or anything else like that? How did you enjoy Amy Adams' character in this movie?
It reminded me a lot of her character from Woman in the Window, where she just
Very
kind
different
of,
person.
well, I mean, a very different person, yes, because she had, like, the Woman in the Window had, like, a fear of, like, leaving
Right.
her place. But, like, the fact that, she was seeing these visions, and it was giving her like a lot of anxiety, like going into the ship. I mean, I'm sure like a lot of people would get anxiety from going into an alien spaceship, but
Yeah.
like, the character, the way she acted with that anxiety reminded me of the other
Mm.
movie. And um, just generally, like, she starts off kind of, established as a person who does not have a lot in her life. Like, her life is not fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a really good job of establishing that. And it felt a little bit like I couldn't help but think about Woman in the Window, because it just felt like I was seeing a lot of the same. I mean, I know she's the same actress, but she felt like the same character almost, because of the behavior.
There's
So,
similar behavior across them.
yeah. But I mean, that's not to say that like Amy Adams is not a great actress, because I thought she did a really good job. The acting was really good. But yeah, I don't know. I liked a lot of the ideas behind it, especially with the language stuff and the different ways that like offer weapon can mean so many things and could be interpreted in so many ways. And
Right.
Like
You also have to
that's
think about what,
communication.
yeah, and it's not just about what you understand. You have to think about what they understand as well. So it makes it even more complicated. And they even talk about how it was problematic that certain groups of countries were engaging them with a game. And she's like, "Oh, that's a problem." And they even ask, "Well, why is that a problem?" And he says, "Because any type of interaction is through opposition, and that means that someone has to lose." And you're like, "Oh, wow." Like, there's just so many things you don't even think about because you're just thinking, yeah, playing shogi, that's there's nothing wrong with that. And it's like, yeah, except if this is you're learning chess, then our interaction is only through a winner and a loser, and you don't want that when trying to establish a camaraderie and friendship with a whole nother group of people. So yeah, the movie is definitely very clever. Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, you've expressed it that it's a movie that isn't necessarily for you, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from the fact that it is absolutely a very well made, well like structured and good movie. But it is one of those movies, and I think that Cheryl wouldn't be alone in this. Where there's probably a lot of people out there that would watch the movie and just not enjoy it, even though I do think, like we said, it is a good movie. But I'm at least happy that Cheryl can acknowledge it's a good movie because some of those other people wouldn't even say that.
Yeah, again, I didn't like it, but I could see that it's a well-made movie.
Absolutely. But what did you guys think about Arrival? Have you seen it? Do you think that it was a little too long? Did you think that it wasn't as interesting as I thought it was? Are you kind of in the camp of Cheryl, or do you think that it's like one of the greatest movies and is it in your top 10 list, top five? What have you thought about the movie? Comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we'll see you all next time.